Well, thank you very much. And on behalf of Leader Scott Pilaf and myself, welcome. We just had the opportunity to hear the comments from the President Pro Tem and the Speaker, and I have to say that I was very disappointed by what I heard, because I did not hear a plan as to how we are going to fix this terrible situation. And unfortunately, it's apparent to me that the Republicans still think this is a good idea, that this is a good law. Unfortunately, Republican leadership has utterly failed in their handling of the situation. The governor and the Republican leaders won't say it, but we will. Discrimination is wrong, and it should be illegal. Businesses are heading for the exits. Hoosiers are fearful their neighbors are going to be subject to state-sanctioned discrimination. And to quell those concerns, we must send a strong signal. And that signal is, in Indiana, we do not condone discrimination, we do not tolerate discrimination, and we will not legislate discrimination. You know, this isn't 1993. We don't legislate backward or to the attitudes of a foregone era. Hoosiers rightfully accept us to look to the future. Now, while the Republicans may not have a plan on how to fix this situation, we do. And if Republicans want a fix, there's only one choice, and that is repeal this law. There is a way forward. There is a second chance, and it's a very precious second chance that we have. And we owe it to every Hoosier to get this right. We need to take clear, actionable steps to repair the image of our state. We can't afford to forfeit a single job or to drive out a single talented individual, because there's no compromise when it comes to discrimination. So let's start with a full repeal of RFRA, period. Repeal, repeal, repeal. Now from there we could take other bold action. Let's add language to the Indiana Civil Rights Act guaranteeing protections for every citizen. By the way, they may not have a plan, we do. We have the language to repeal the bill, and we also have language which would bolster our Indiana Civil Rights Act to cover all individuals in the state of Indiana. You know, everyday Hoosiers have laid their cards on the table. They've made it clear how they feel about this law. They've demanded we take clear, direct action, and we have a responsibility to every Hoosier. Nothing short of repealing this hateful act will accomplish this aim. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Leader Scott Pilaf of the Indiana House. Leader Pilaf.
Thank you, and thank you, Leader Lannon, and thank you for everyone gathered here today. They were wrong. And it's time that they admitted that they made a horrible mistake. We have a power imbalance here in Indiana. And because of this power imbalance, our leaders have become out of touch, and they no longer understand Hoosiers. The fact is that Hoosiers are extraordinarily tolerant and welcoming. And what I am gratified by is that they are better than their governmental leaders. If there's one thing I hope the rest of the nation sees, it is the voices of protest. It is the voices of dissent. It is the people standing up for their friends and neighbors and their fellow citizens and saying that this is wrong. Because in the end, that is what is going to fix this image problem for Indiana. It's going to be the people of Indiana, the ones that have been misjudged and mischaracterized by the leaders in this very building, who do not represent the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens. I'm gratified that Leader Lannon laid out this plan, because the fact is that we've been embarrassed before the nation. I have people in Northwest Indiana and throughout the entire state. They're saying to me, Scott, today I'm embarrassed to be a Hoosier. We are not this kind of people. It begins with repealing this law. That is the only thing that will start the process of reversing the damage that has been done to the people of this state. And by the way, this is going to be a process. This has been extraordinarily harmful. We've had business leaders and some of the biggest business leaders in our state and our nation have said that this is an insufferable course of action. In addition to that, we have to commit to the fact that there can be no rush job. There can be no fig leaf. There can be no Band-Aid for what's transpired here. We're going to have to take real action. It's going to have to be substantive. The repeal being the first step, and then we have to send a message to the nation and to the world that not only are we willing to admit our mistakes, but we're willing to demonstrate the tolerance of our fellow citizens that are understood and are a sacred value to the people of this state. With that, we'll be happy to entertain any questions. They're going through the stages of grief right now, and they're stuck in the denial phase. Right. They have no sense of how big of a problem this is. I would submit that those that have served here for a number of years have never seen this kind of conflagration. People are angry, they're upset, and they're insulted. And some sort of patchwork solution isn't going to get it done.
Yeah, when you have a bill which is this tainted, this corrupted, there's no fix to it. You just get rid of it. You know, my mother used to tell me, if you bring home a bag of potatoes and you've got a rotten potato in there, you throw it out. You don't let it contaminate the rest of the bag. And I think that's what we have here, and unfortunately it's our reputation that's being tainted. So no, the way out here, if we're going to send a strong message, and that's what has to happen, we cannot just mealy mouth around about this. We have to send a strong message of commitment to fairness, equality, and welcoming in the state of Indiana. And the first step to do that is to repeal. Yes, ma'am. Well, I don't know, but the first thing you have to do when you've got a real problem is you have to admit you have a problem. You have to be willing to set aside all the politics. You know, what's happened here is, unfortunately, there's been over the years I've been here, I've seen this happen, that the radicalism of the right wing has taken over. And I think in this case that's what happened. They need to do a reversal, a 180 on this, and get us towards the path of healing the reputation of the state of Indiana.
No. As a matter of fact, I would guess that companies like Apple probably have some very well-remunerated corporate attorneys who have viewed this. But even before we get into the legalisms, we have to remember it's moved beyond the legalisms. It's about the image of our state. And when this bill was signed, right over here in this very office, standing behind the governor was a mishmash of every anti-marriage equality lobbyist that exists. And if you read what they say about the bill, it clearly demonstrates that there is an intent to discriminate. Now, whether that was understood by the legislative leaders, I'll leave that up to them to explain. But those pushing for it seem to understand what it meant.
And let me also add this. 6 times yesterday the governor was asked, does this bill allow discrimination? And he didn't answer that. Even today in the press availability, when the question was asked, well, will this allow somebody to discriminate against somebody on the basis of sexual orientation? The answer is, we'll have to let the courts decide. So they don't know. So how in the world can they say that there's some misconception about this bill when they can't say clearly it doesn't discriminate, and they're afraid to say that? Yes, ma'am. You know, we could take a look at whatever language is available, but one thing you have to make sure, the only way that these RFRA bills really do work is if you also have a strong Civil Rights Act, a state Civil Rights Act that says we do not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, among other things. And so, you know, who knows? We'll take a look at what the specific provisions are that are going to be advanced. We didn't hear that just a few minutes ago, by the way. And then we'll go from there. But I think you have to clearly and boldly say and lead and say Indiana does not discriminate. We're not about discrimination. We're a friendly, welcoming state. This bill has tried to undermine that, and we've got to take bold action to counter that.
Tim, I want to mention something as a follow-up to that, too. Let's not forget that in both houses, Democrats offered language that might have granted some clarifications in advance. And this was before this whole thing blew up into a national embarrassment. We said, look, if it's not about discrimination, prove it by adopting this amendment or adopting that amendment. Make it clear it's not about discrimination. Had they done that, and had they not just been slapped aside just out of partisan instincts, we wouldn't have been at this spot right now.
I have the language to do that. We've already asked for a draft of that. I wouldn't think so. We have 4 weeks to do what's right. We ought to find the time to solve this problem and to make it right. Many other states have already adopted into their state civil rights acts, so we can look to them for guidance on this thing. There's certainly a way to solve that problem in terms of the timing.
And Brandon, let's not forget, this wasn't just any initiative. This was Senate Bill 101, and for the Indiana media, you know what that means. That means that it was a priority. It was the first bill introduced in the Senate. And now this is what this session has become about. So we got 4 weeks left. Let's let the hearings roll.
Let's go over here. I'll let you handle it to Chicago.
You know what? I want to answer that with a bit of an anecdote. Because, as you know, I'm a Northwest Indiana person. In terms of the district I represent, Chicago media market, this issue was at the top of the Chicago television news every evening over the weekend. And just yesterday morning, I had one of my constituents come up to me and say, Scott, thank you for the positions you've taken. This has to change. I just had a huge reservation canceled because the customer said to me, I will not spend a dime in Indiana again. These have real implications for real people in a business sense. And it doesn't surprise me that Mayor Emanuel, who's got a bit of a re-election campaign going on himself right now, wouldn't make a pitch for that. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't be surprising.
See, does somebody back there have another question? Okay, sir. Well, you know, you get that question, but you have to take in context when these bills, a lot of them were originally signed into law. It was a number of years ago before you had such the advancement in terms of equality, marriage equality, and these other issues. But, you know, we don't want to take that chance. I mean, I just heard the President Pro Tem make some comment about, well, we'll just have to wait and see how this all plays out in court. And it surely will play out in court. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because when they clearly cannot answer the question of will this allow for someone to discriminate against a person, it's going to raise that possibility. You have to assume that it's going to occur, and when it occurs, you know, we need to know that. Well, there's a way to do that, and it's to do what we're proposing here. I don't know why we would want to risk the idea that we'll have to spend years in litigation over the issue of whether or not this type of a bill will allow for discrimination. Sir? Well, that's ridiculous. If the bill, you know, we already have years and years of precedent on a national basis, and also I believe we have a state amendment which guarantees freedom of religion in the state of Indiana and across this country. We're strong supporters of freedom of religion. If anything, I sometimes think that government gets too involved in the issue of religion, and I think that the purpose of the First Amendment was to protect everyone's right to their own beliefs, and you don't have to just be, you know, going along with the mainstream religion that prevails within a community, for example. So that's totally wrong whatsoever. The problem with this act is when they cannot answer that question. Could this bill be used to discriminate against somebody on the basis of sexual orientation? That's when you have a real problem, and that's our concern.
And one of that question also needs to be answered with another question. Why? Why was this needed? We've served here a while. You've served here a while here, haven't you, Senator Lannon? Yeah. There was no barnstorm of folks complaining that their religious liberties were being impacted. It was a made-up issue. It was a made-up issue, and there was a narrow group of interests that were wanting a consolation prize following the marriage equality issue. And that's simply what it was, and that needs to be said.
Well, no. I mean, unfortunately, that's less than a week away. As Leader Pilas said, this needs to be done in a thoughtful fashion. Now, we think we have a solution here, but as has been suggested, it will take some time. So, it's too bad. It's too bad this bill came about in the manner that it was brought about. It was not a bill which, as Leader Pilas mentioned, was needed. We can't control the timing on that. The last thing we should do now is rush through for a solution just because we have this event here. It's very unfortunate as to the timing, but that timing was brought on by the proponents of this bill.
Yes.
I second that. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Well, sometimes I think that the Republican leadership forgets we're around here. We offered all these amendments, both on the House side and the Senate side, and they were rejected, I think, completely on a party line basis. I wish, they should have listened to us, but we're more than willing to listen to them at this point in time.
Here's what's changed: the public. The public has been educated, and the public is angry. And in a representative government, I suspect that some of those representatives are having second thoughts about the decision they made. And in fairness, some of them were probably led into this, not being entirely sure of maybe what they were supporting, or they were being told it was one thing and it was maybe another. I promise you that none of them are happy about the explanations that they're being forced to give.
Yeah, I'll answer that. Everybody at this point in time needs to set aside the arrogance and the politics and listen to the people. And the people are saying, this is not Indiana. This bill does not reflect the people of the great state of Indiana. We are a welcoming, tolerant citizens, and they do not want a bill which says to the world otherwise. I think I can say that there is a scenario under which that definitely could occur. It knocks aside all the current ordinances which are out there, which protect people on the basis of sexual orientation. And again, I'll say it, when they were asked, does this bill allow discrimination or not, they say, we don't know.
And again, one last thing on that, and at this point bears repeating, the proponents, those that were pushing for this bill behind the scenes gave the answer to that question. They believe it allows discrimination and are right now putting out appeals to raise money on that basis.
Yes. I disagree with that completely. We are, as I've said previously, Indiana is a state which welcomes everyone. and we certainly don't discriminate against somebody on the basis of religion. My opinion on that is that people in Indiana pretty much feel like you're entitled to your own beliefs. Whether or not some beliefs should be translated into public policy is a different question. But we respect people of all religions, so that's absolutely wrong.
And one other point, and thanks, Tim, and one other point, people of faith are objecting to this bill.
That's right.
People of faith are angry along with everybody else because they don't believe these things in their hearts, and they don't believe that that's the message of their faith, that you ought to be treating people fundamentally differently.
You know, many people feel you may have certain beliefs about what's right and what's wrong morally, but the one thing you don't do is discriminate against people. Discrimination is always felt, I think, by and large, by the good people of the state of Indiana to be wrong.